who are watching the recording. My name is Lorenzo. I've been a mentor for a couple of years already here in this program, and I already know some of you guys because I had a chance to chat with you in private sessions. Today we're going to host a session about how to present, which in many cases means how to pitch, but not necessarily. I think that what we're going to see today applies to pitching to investors, but it goes a little bit beyond that. I think that pitching is important, but it's not the only thing because we're constantly pitching our project, right? You're pitching to a mentor, you're pitching to a potential employee or a potential co-founder, you're pitching to a potential partner, you're pitching to a potential client, right? So in general, I think it's very important to learn how to explain what you're working on in a very efficient and professional way, right? And actually, so I'm going to start showing my screen. I have a few slides. I think I'm not going to be able to see your faces when I'm presenting. So please just turn on your mic if you have a question. Feel free to interrupt me. We have about 90 minutes, more or less. That's what I've been told. So we have ample time for questions. Okay. And now, boom, you should be able to see my screen, right? So I think that of course, it had to fail. Why not? There you go. You guys can see my screen, right? Somebody says yes because I can't see your faces, please. Awesome, cool.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, as I said, feel free to interrupt me. Just turn on your mic. So why is it so important to be able to talk about your project? And it's because of something that I learned when I was in college. My background is in mathematics, so nothing to do with business or public speaking. Yet this is something that my professor in college taught me. If you are not able to explain something, it means that you don't really know it. You know, the typical excuse, well, I know how it is. It's just that I can find the words right now to explain it. Right? Well, that's an excuse. The reality is, you know, if you know that 2 plus 2 is 4, just say it's 4, right? But if I ask you how much is 2 plus 2, and you're like, well, so, you know, yeah, you get 2 and then you add out of 2, like clearly you don't know what you're talking about. And this is very relevant in our sector, in business, because too many times I meet people who are pretending to know what they're building, like the product, the problem, the user, the solution, the algorithm, the smart contract, whatever. But in reality, they are not able to communicate what they're doing. And the result is, from my perspective, you don't know what you're talking about. And look, I might be exaggerating right now. Maybe I'm being too dramatic. Maybe you do know what you're talking about, but it doesn't really matter if you're not able to communicate it to other people, right? A business that is based on other people doing something with you and for you, right? So it's not an individual thing. It's a collective thing, right? So please start thinking about it. Treat your communication skills as much as your hard skills, as much as coding, you know, or as much as building products and selling. It's as important as those skills. My first recommendation of the day is, you know, this is not just about talking about your project. It's about having a strategy. It's about thinking before opening your mouth. Think and speak doesn't necessarily mean don't say stupid things, don't embarrass yourself. It literally means, you know, before you actually engage in a conversation or in any type of communication, because it could be an email, it could be a presentation, before you actually start talking or start communicating, you need to have a clear understanding of what your goal is. If you meet an investor, for example, at a bar, and the investor is asking you, hey, what are you up to? What are you working on? Right? There are many ways to answer that question. and they will depend on your goal. Are you trying to educate the investor? Are you trying to raise money? So convince the investor that they should look into your project? Are you just like chatting for fun? And my point here is all of these different, situations have different goals. Hence, you should treat that interaction differently. And we're gonna see a few examples, but the first one is this. A pitch deck is not a company deck. When you guys are asked to put together some slides to talk about your project, 99% of cases, you're working on a company deck. And, Peter, JK, like some of the people that have been working here, I think that you might remember that we've been talking about this right in our sessions. It's like, okay, you have a few slides that talk about your project. And I learned a lot by looking at those slides. Although your slides, even if they're presenting what you're doing, they're not achieving your goal, which is to convince somebody to invest in your company, right? So if you want to raise money, besides showing what you're working on, you need to show that you are a good business opportunity, a good investment opportunity. So yes, I want to know about your co-founders. Yes, I want to know about the market. Yes, I want to know about how you came out with the idea. But if you're not delivering the reasons why somebody should put money into your business, then you're educating your audience, but you're not achieving your goal, which is, getting an investor. So what is the difference between a pitch deck and a company deck? A company deck is basically slides that talk about your company to show what you're doing, to show what you're working on, your idea, your execution, your plans. And the purpose is mainly educational. The goal of a company deck is to share information, to educate somebody. The goal of a pitch deck is to raise money. I would say maybe 80% of the slides of a pitch deck and of a company deck are the same, but that 20% makes a huge difference. For example, a pitch deck will definitely have a slide or two or three about the fundraising. I don't know if it happened to you guys, but it happens to me all the time as a mentor, as an investor. A lot of companies come to me and they want to pitch their pitch deck. And then at the end, there is no slide about the fundraising. So they don't say, A, that they're raising money, B, how much money they're raising, C, to do what, D, how, right? They completely don't, avoid talking about fundraising. In many cases, because they're shy, my opinion. And so, my answer to that is that, okay, thank you for educating me. Now I know what you're working on. But what do you want? Well, of course, I'm raising money because I'm talking to an investor. Well, it's not that obvious. Your goal is not properly communicated when you're communicating with me. Why? Because the vehicle that you're using doesn't fulfill that goal. Okay. So this is just to say, this might be obvious to some of you guys, but I see this mistake over and over. And so a lot of the things that we're going to cover today are somehow, best practices / typical mistakes / whatever. So I might not be blowing your mind, but I hope that with these slides, I'm just pointing out something that might help you communicate better and explain, what you're doing in a more professional way. So think, then speak. What is your goal? Based on that, decide how you want to craft your speech. Okay. On the flip side, this is not about you. When you are communicating, you already know your story. So this is not about, your vanity of telling people how cool your project is. The whole point of communicating with somebody is to fulfill the goal that your audience has. If I'm spending time here today teaching you this, hosting this session, I already know what I'm talking about. I don't need to go through this session. The reason why I'm doing it is because I want to communicate. I want to deliver this content to you guys. And so I hope that you guys will not only enjoy it, but also use it. So the whole point here, the most important people here in this session are you. It's not me. I already know this. I'm not hosting this session because I enjoy it. I mean, I am enjoying it, but this is not the goal. The goal here is for you to hopefully learn something that might be valuable in your business, right? So who is the most important person here? It's you guys. It's the audience. And so before starting an interaction, before starting, talking or communicating, yes, you should know what your goal is, but the most important thing is, what is the goal of your audience? What is your audience expecting from interacting with you? Do they want to learn a new concept? Do they want to explore an investment opportunity? Do they want to have a good time? What do they want to do? Do they want to make a decision? Maybe an investment decision or maybe a strategic decision? What are they expecting as a result of interacting with you? Okay. So again, this might be silly, this might be obvious, right? But it's one of the most important things that I invite you to consider before opening your mouth. Ask yourself, what is your goal? But most importantly, what are they expecting, right? So if I'm an investor, if I go to a demo day at the end of an accelerator and I'm scouting projects, I want to see, I have $100,000 and I want to invest in 5 projects. I'm actively looking for projects to invest. And I go to a demo day and I see a bunch of slides. And you're not saying that you're raising money. And you're not saying to do what. And you're not saying how you will make me money. Well, then why are we having this conversation? Like, thank you for educating me, but why are we having this conversation? Okay. So basically what I'm saying is, you need to step into your audience shoes and or feet, how do you say it in English? But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like a role game, So the best way to evaluate, for example, your pitch deck or your company deck or your email or whatever you want to share with somebody is take a step back, play this role game, pretend you are your audience, and then try to understand, how your audience would feel after reading your email or listening to your pitch deck. Do they get all of the information they were expecting to receive? Are they empowered to make a decision if that's what they wanted to do? Or can they move forward? Can they make, a decision? Okay. So too many times, too often, I see that people come to me, they press play, they start talking, and they're kind of like repeating something without necessarily like understanding, the situation. So this is what I'm trying to avoid, right? And in particular, what I'm saying here is this concept of the perfect pitch is wrong. It doesn't exist. The perfect pitch doesn't exist. When you go online, when you Google perfect pitch template, 12 slides, 15 slides, whatever model you find, there are a lot of templates out there. When you find something like this is the formula to raise money. This is the formula to pitch your project to investor. It's bullshit. The perfect pitch doesn't exist because your pitch will depend on your goal, the audience goal, the profile of the audience, the expectation, the circumstances, right? So in theory, whenever you're talking to somebody, whenever you're presenting your project to somebody, you should always go back and say, okay, what are the expectations? And craft a specific pitch specifically for that circumstance, for that situation. You know what I'm saying, Nate? So this is just to hopefully, you know, make you realize that, you know, a lot of these things that you hear, the perfect formula, the perfect pitch, like it's a myth, okay? But you really need to be in control of your communication. So use your brain before you start communicating. Okay, so lesson 1, understand what is your goal, what your goal is. Understand what your audience goal is. So far, so good. The third point here is, what is the context? By context, I refer to all of the information that is previously known before you actually start communicating. For example, it happens all the time. I go to a conference or an event in Miami or wherever, and somebody comes to me like, hey, Lorenzo, how's it going? I wanted to update you on my project. So, you know, we just finalized the second version of the product, and this is the traction, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And they just start talking. And they don't realize that maybe I don't remember them. Not because I'm an asshole, not because I mean, like, I like people. It's just that, you know, it might happen. I talk to a lot of people. I have a lot of people pitching to me. And so sometimes, you know, it might happen that I don't remember you. So what is my point? My point is they are assuming that I know what they're talking about. And so when they give me their update, they're expecting me to remember who they are, what they do, what problem they're trying to solve, when we spoke, you know, like, and so they don't realize that without that information, whatever they're talking about, like, to me, is just like noise. I am not capable of understanding what they're saying because I lack the context, because I lack the background information. And so they're literally wasting their time and my time. Again, sorry, it sounds like I'm an asshole, but like, I'm just saying, you know, so maybe a better approach is, hey, Lorenzo, how's it going? I don't know if you remember, we met 2 years ago at this conference in, I don't know, in California. And I'm working on ABC, and I would like to give you an update. You know, give me a chance to clarify the context so that we can have a conversation at the same level. So now I know what we're talking about. And so if you're adding more information, you know, now I'm able to understand what you're saying. This is what I mean by context. Like, make sure that the starting point of the conversation, you know, is level. Another example. Some of you, for example, JK, let me use you as an example. You guys are working on video games, right? The way you pitch your project depends a lot on how much your audience knows about the gaming industry. If you're pitching to an investor that is actively investing in the gaming space, most likely that investor knows the industry, the problems, the market. The investor knows that the gaming industry is huge. It's bigger than movies and music combined. Most likely they know that the industry is growing. Most likely they know that the majority of Web3 games fail because they didn't make any sense, because people like to play fun games and blah, blah. Like, all of that is very well known to somebody with experience in the gaming industry. So if you know that you're speaking to an expert, just go straight to the point. Show them why you're different. Show them why your game is more engaging than other games, right? It doesn't really make sense to start from scratch, kind of like defining what a video game is and why video games are cool. Like, skip all of that, because you're going to waste a lot of time and and the investor is going to look like, you don't know who I am, clearly. Like, why are you wasting my time? But vice versa, if you are talking to an investor who is not familiar with the gaming industry, well, maybe that investor doesn't realize how big the opportunity is. Somebody who is not part of the gaming industry most likely will not understand, the opportunity, the size of the market, the problems, right? And so if you start showing like the game, hey, look at the game, look at the tokenomics, and look at this, like you're bunching, you're throwing out a lot of details that without the proper context don't make any sense, right? So gaming is a really good example. If the content is clear, then you can just skip the whole intro and go straight to the point. If you don't know the context, you won't be able to understand anything. So you need to start from literally from scratch, right? From the basics. Okay. So what is the best way to figure out if you and your audience are on the same level? You are able to have like a conversation at the same level. If you're not sure, well, research your audience. If you're pitching to an investor, you should spend some time in researching the investor, right? To know if they're active in your space, if they already made some investment in the same space, right? And B, worst case scenario, just ask, hey, are you familiar with the gaming industry? Hey, do you remember we met 2 years ago? Hey, what would be, right? Instead of assuming, just make sure, validate that you're speaking the same language as your audience, so that you can go like straight to the point. Okay, so don't be shy. Ask. Even, for example, what is your audience goal? If you're not sure, ask. Hey, what are you expecting from today's session? Hey, we had 30 minutes. What are you expecting? And speaking of time, that's my last point here on the slide. How much time do you have? This is critical. Before you press play and you start pitching or you start talking, you need to understand how much time you have. It makes a huge difference if I give you 5 minutes versus 30 minutes. It makes a huge difference if I have a hard stop. So, when the time is over, I'm gonna shut you down. Versus, I'm on vacation, I have time, just go for it. It makes a huge, huge difference. It is obvious when you are in a pitch competition, for example, because you know that you might have like 3 minutes and then they're gonna turn off your mic, right? So you understand that in a pitch competition environment. But something similar happens in a meeting with investors, for example. Hey, I have 30 minutes. At 9:30, I have another call. So I don't care if you're done or not. I will have to jump on another call, right? So knowing how much time you have is critical. If you are not sure, ask, hey, how much time do you have today? Oh, I have 50 minutes. Okay, so let me give you the 15-minute version of my pitch. Oh, I have 30 minutes. Okay, well, then let me give you the 20-minute version, and we're going to have extra time for questions at the end. Like, make sure that you understand how much time you have and make sure that you show that you're in control of time. So a good tip here, guys, is when you're rehearsing, since you might not know how much time you're going to have in tomorrow's meeting or next week's presentation, a good idea might be to, can I have a modular approach? Like, write down basically the things that you want to communicate. Well, I want to talk about the idea. I want to talk about the problem. I want to talk about the product. I want to talk about the team. I want to talk about the financials, right? You have a few things that you think that you should cover. Try to prioritize those things and say, okay, these are the things that I must cover. Otherwise, it's impossible to understand what I'm doing. If I don't talk about the solution, well, then you're not going to understand what I'm doing. Or, for example, if you're a little bit more advanced, if I don't talk about the traction, you're not going to be able to understand my project or the value or whatever. And then there is a second bucket of things, let me call them the ingredients. They're kind of like things that if you have time, it would be cool to cover. But if you only have 2 minutes, you're not going to be able to talk about those things. Like nice to have things. And then you have a third bucket of things, which is conversational points. How I came up with the story. I mean, how I came up with the idea, or the story of how I met my co-founder, or why I'm so passionate about this, right? Those are very important things because from a human perspective, they allow you to explain the, let's say, the human component of the business. So for example, if you're having a casual conversation at the bar, that's potentially the best way to start. Because if you start talking about business, like straight out of the bat, it might be a little bit too aggressive. So if you're meeting somebody at the bar, a good way to get into the topic is to maybe talk about your personal experience, right? That's cool. But if I give you 2 minutes and a microphone and I put you on stage and you spend 90 seconds talking about how you met your co-founder, right? Clearly, that is not going to fly, right? So, long story short, in some cases, you can rehearse, you know how much time you have, and you can be prepared. But you also need to be prepared, to pitch in virtually any condition. And for that, you need to have a mental order of this is essential. If I don't cover these things, it's impossible to understand my project. This is nice to have, size of the market, I don't know, competitive advantage, all of that. And then the third bucket is this is something that I can use to engage with the audience. But if I'm short in time, I might just skip it. Okay. So this is called what I call the modular approach. So in some cases, you can rehearse. In other cases, you need to improvise. Yet, make sure that you have kind of like a technique, right? Improvising doesn't mean just start talking and let's see what happens, right? Improvising means that in real time, you're basically putting together a pitch in real time, okay? So you need to have some criteria. Do we have questions so far? Remember that I cannot see you. I can't see anything, basically, the chat or your face. So if you have questions, just turn on the mic. If not, I will keep going, hoping that you guys are still there. Vehicle versus format. This is very important, and I'll show you an example in a second. But just to explain what I mean by this, the vehicle is like, okay, I want to communicate something. For example, I want to talk about my project. Where is that conversation happening? Is it an event? Is it a private meeting? Is it a presentation in front of an audience? Is it something that was scheduled? Is it something that is improvised? Is it a pitch competition? Right? So clearly it makes a huge difference. And we just discussed about it, right? So based on the circumstances, you should either put together your pitch or be able to improvise in a professional way. Okay. Clearly, in a pitch competition, you have time constraints. In a private meeting, you might also have time constraints. So make sure that you ask if you're not sure. Now, once the vehicle is set, okay, this is a pitch competition or this is a private meeting, whatever it is. Okay, what is the right format? And I want to challenge you with this because, for example, pitch competition, you're automatically thinking about slides. for many years, in the majority of times when I get invited to talk at conferences, I don't use slides. I just show up on the stage with my microphone and I just go for it. Why do I do that? A, because in a world where everybody uses slides, being different is a good thing. I can tell you, the moment people realize that I'm the only speaker who doesn't have slides, they would pay more attention. Even out of curiosity, even just to say, what is this dude doing without slides? Like, who is this guy? Like, just because of that, people will shut down and pay attention. So it's a way for me to make sure that people are listening, at least at the beginning. Of course, if I don't say, smart things, they will just like ignore me, but at least I had their attention for a few seconds. And B, because if you're interested in what I'm saying, you will continue to pay attention, because if you miss what I'm saying, you're lost. Let's say slides are a good way for people. It makes it easier for people to understand what you're saying, because even if I miss some of the words of the speaker, I still understand more or less the overall story because I have it on the screen. But if I take the slides away, you're forced to listen to me. So the level of engagement goes up exponentially. And so if the audience is interested, they will, completely listen to you with 100% of their senses, because they don't have, any type of, they don't have an alternative. And it's very interesting to see how the audience then, basically stays engaged, and it makes the whole presentation much better, right? So, again, like with slides, you don't need to, for example, keep eye contact with the speaker. I don't need to, because I had the perfect excuse. I'm looking at the slides, so I don't have to pay attention to you, right? But without slides, you will have to watch me. So reason number one, people listen to me, or at least at the beginning, they pay attention. People number two, if they like what I'm saying, I completely get their attention throughout the whole presentation, and it makes the engagement much better. Reason number three, because it allows me to improvise, and I do it all the time. So at some point, I can ask a question and say, okay, what do you guys want to talk about now? Do you want to talk about fundraising, or do you want to talk about valuation models? And you can quickly tell fundraising. All right, let's talk about fundraising. Boom. And so it's impossible to do that with slides, because with slides, you're basically planning the whole thing up front, which means that you're taking a huge risk, because if when you're presenting, you realize that the slides are not what you should talk about, that if you realize that the audience is not interested, well, then it's too late. Those are your slides. You have to finish, right? But if you don't have slides, you can pivot in real time. So if you see that people are more interested in something else, you can pivot, right? This goes back to my modular approach, right? I have some topics that I kind of like prepare, and then depending on how it goes, I decide, what to throw in. And so the audience will feel that I'm actually customizing my speech based on their questions or based on what they're more interested in, right? So it's a win-win. I get more people engaged, and the audience basically get exactly what they want, what they need, what they're curious about, right? Rather than taking this big chance of preparing the slides, and then if they like the slides, cool. If they don't like the slides, guess what? They're gonna leave. They're gonna go get a coffee or whatever, but they're gonna leave. If they don't like what you're presenting, they're gonna leave, right? Anyway, going back to here. So once you understand the vehicle, ask yourself, what is the right format? Should I use slides, yes or no? If I use slides, what type of slide? A lot of text or no text? Should I include a video or not? Should I include a lot of data, like graphs, statistics, or should I make it more like a story? This is the story of Michael, who is, I don't know, going to work, and he missed the bus, and then he was late, and he got laid out, and like, what is, like, are you trying to engage with the audience by telling like a story, or are you trying to educate the audience by showing hard facts? Okay, so this is not obvious, and you might think that if you do, again, like a pitch competition, need slides. Maybe not. If you have a private meeting, maybe you think that it's not a good idea to have slides. Maybe it is, right? So really think, for every occasion, what is the right way to communicate what you want to communicate, okay? And specifically talking about slides, even if you say, okay, I'm going to use slides, the next question should be, what type of slides? Let me give you an example. Here on the screen, I had 3 very different types of slides: an image, a statement, and a report, let's call it, right? So when you put together a presentation, okay, you're using slides, but what is the use of those slides? What is the use of the presentation? So if I am presenting, then the role of the slides is to support what I'm saying, to make it easier from the audience perspective to follow me. So most likely, the most efficient way of doing that is through an image, or maybe through both statements. Like, this is not about you. Okay, if I put that slide on the screen, you still need to listen to what I had to say, because that slide is kind of like, it's trying to catch your attention. Is trying to structure the conversation. Okay, now we're talking about this, but you still need to listen to what I'm saying if you want to understand what I want to say, right? It's like the image. The image gives you a mood. The image potentially helps you remember a concept. But if I just show you the image and I don't explain the image, you won't get it, right? So when you're presenting, my suggestion is that you use slides with little text or no text, so that the slides help your goal of communicating, but without taking over. People still need to listen to you, because that's what you want in a presentation. You want to dominate the conversation. You want people to drop whatever they're doing and listen to you. So minimize the noise, minimize distractions, and whatever you have on the screen is supposed to support what you're saying and drive the attention to what you're saying. If I put a slide with a lot of text, with a lot of colors, with a lot of numbers, with a chart, with a table, with whatever, guess what the audience is going to do? They're going to stop listening to you, and they're going to look at the slide, read the slide. And, the people I'm working with here, I'm sure that you guys will remember this, because I've been very vocal about it. Right? If I can read it by myself, then I don't need you to read it out loud. It's actually worse than that. It's easier for people to read rather than listening. People read faster than what you can say with your words. And so if you put something on the screen, people will read it, and then we'll be like, okay, let's move on. And even if you're trying to maybe add some depth, details, or maybe you're coming up with a story, like, it's too late. People already got it. It's too late. And so right? So be very conscious when you're using slides. How are you going to use those slides? Vice versa. If the presentation that you're putting together is going to be read by the audience without you explaining it, for example, you're going to send it by email, well, then, of course, you want the presentation to be self-sufficient, meaning, whoever reads the presentation will have to be able to understand the whole story autonomously by just reading the slides. So you need full sentences. Not maybe bullet points might not work. You really need like full sentences. You need a lot of data, right? And because you're not going to have a chance to answer questions, to clarify concepts, or to convince your audience about something, right? It's all about the slides. So you need to make sure that the slides are clear and are valuable, that all of the information is there, right? So this might be obvious, maybe you heard it 1,000 times, yet is one of the most recurrent mistakes. And I know, like, when I bring it up, everybody's like, oh yeah, of course, that's obvious, yet people don't do it, right? So think about it. What is the right format for the right vehicle? Okay. No questions, right? Can somebody say no questions just to make sure that you're still there?
No questions.
No questions.
Thank you. All right, let's go for it. Two more things. I was talking with JK about data rooms this week, so I decided to add this slide. A data room is something that is getting more and more and more popular nowadays, although it's not a new concept at all. A data room is a repository of information that you might want to share, especially with investors when you're fundraising. Doesn't need to be only with investors, but the typical use of a data room is with investors. So a data room is a repository. In this case, this is an example I think this is done with Notion. It's actually a template you can find. Just Google templates of data room, and you will see that there are a few. But why am I talking about data rooms? Because we are talking about communicating, and usually kind of like the emphasis in one meeting, one pitch deck, one pitch competition, or one presentation, or one whatever. But in reality, when you're presenting a project, it's not a one-shot type of thing. For example, if you're having a conversation with an investor, in reality, that conversation is the sum of many interactions that you're going to have with the investor. Most likely, the first interaction is either a short introduction or an email to schedule a longer meeting. Then you had the meeting, but the meeting is not gonna be like a 5-hour meeting. It's gonna be probably a 15 to 20 to 30-minute meeting, which is enough to present the project, and it's enough for the investor to understand if they want to continue the conversation or not. So the goal of the first email is to secure the first meeting. But the goal of the first meeting might not be to secure an investment. The goal of the first meeting is to secure a follow-up meeting and potentially another one, and potentially to start a due diligence. So what I'm trying to say here is that you need to be very strategic. This is not about one single interaction. Investors will not decide if they invest or not based on your email, or based on the first meeting, or based on your pitch competition, or based on whatever, the conversation they had at the bar with you. This is not Shark Tank. This is not a TV show, right? But those interactions are key to potentially unlock further interactions. At the end of the whole process, most likely we have to cover a lot of aspects, from how you came up with the idea, which is not priority, but it will come out at some point. Somebody might ask about it, to, the experience of the team, the vision, the financials, the cap table, the valuation, the tokenomics, right? All of that. The point is that is not going to happen in one single interaction. It is going to happen over multiple interactions. Okay. So the key here is A, to be prepared so that you can cover the whole process instead of just the first interaction, which is what 90% of startups do. You spend a lot of time on the pitch deck. Because of the pitch deck, or thanks to the pitch deck, you secure a meeting, but then you don't know what to say during the meeting, right? So, and you need to understand that the process is much bigger than just the pitch deck. And B, the complexity of this is that you need to understand when to drop what type of information at what time. So if I talk about maybe my financials during the first meeting, maybe that's a waste of time, because the investor is not ready for that. The investor is still trying to understand if they like you or not, right? So that's kind of like the complexity. Let's go back to the data room. What I like about the data room is that it forces you to combine or to compile all of the information that you might need throughout the whole process of due diligence with an investor in one place. So the data room is very valuable for the audience, let's say the investor, who will have quick access to everything they need. But it's actually a super healthy exercise for you guys, so that you can already map out all of the different pieces of information that you're going to need throughout the whole process of fundraising. Okay. So you need, content about the story, the pitch, the problem, the solution, blah, blah, blah. You need hard data, traction, financials, right? And you need maybe supporting material like your cap table, right? Your documents of incorporations. Because at some point, if you pass all of the filters, investors will ask for those documents. So it's a healthy exercise to have everything already mapped out, ready to go. The audience, the investors, will appreciate that, because they don't need to ask you 2,000 questions. It's already there. And B, it's a really good exercise for you, so that you're mentally prepared. Hey, this is my company, everything. Boom. Now, there are many ways of building the data room. You don't have to include all of these things. You might have, a different approach. That's perfectly fine. That's why, as I said before, the perfect pitch doesn't exist. The perfect data room doesn't exist either. There are templates out there, but you need to come up with your own model. But my point is, consider building a data room, which to me is kind of like the next step after a pitch deck. Pitch deck is step number one. Step two is the data room, right? So this is an example. You will see you can use the data room also from a kind of like project management perspective. For example, you can compile the minutes of meetings. I don't think that's needed, but I think it might be a good idea to have, for example, the list of investor updates. We don't have time now to talk about it, but it's a good idea, to create like your own database of investors. And, you might have a newsletter going out maybe every month with the main updates. And so it's a cool way to build connections with investors. And so you can use the data room as a repository of those investor updates. A, so that it's just one link that you're sharing all the time. You're sending people to the data room and they can find everything. And B, so that new investors that you're adding to your network today will kind of like see, how professional you have been in the past months, right? a few things to consider. So first impression is important. This is kind of like the MVP, right? You cannot wait until you have a perfect data room because the perfect data room doesn't exist. So at some point, you just need to pull the trigger. Although, as a good MVP, make sure that even if it's minimal, it's viable. It's not just a pile of poop just to say that you have a data room, right? For example, make sure that there are no typos, little things. Make sure that the links work, right? Make sure that the information is good, is real. Maybe you don't have the investor updates. Okay, don't include that. You can include it next week or next month. That's fine. But whatever you publish or whatever you share, because this might not be public, make sure that it's professionally crafted. The second thing is be consistent. One advantage of the data room is that everything is collected in one place. And so, for example, if you update your pitch deck, instead of sending a new link, you just update the link here in the data room, right? So it's very convenient. But make sure that if you update something, the whole data room gets updated. So, for example, if you have a new investor update with new data about traction or about financials or whatever, make sure that you're updating the data room as well, and vice versa, right? So this is very important because the moment you start sharing a lot of information about your company, the harder it gets to be consistent. Because of that, keep it simple. Don't overdo. Like, keep it simple, straight to the point. This is what we do. This is who we are. This is why. This is how. These are the documents, right? Don't go crazy. If you have, I don't know, 4 different versions of your demo, maybe pick one, right? This is not your Google Drive. This is a data room, right? So again, look at this from the audience perspective. This doesn't need to be super comprehensive. This needs to be straight to the point, okay? Keep it simple. Give clear answers. When I'm looking at your data room, I'm looking for answers. So what are my questions? Who are you? What do you do? Why is this a good opportunity, right? Make sure that your data room answers these questions. You might have, like, for example, a report about the top 10 trends in the gaming industry in 2024. All right, that's cool. You can add it if you want, but make sure it's at the bottom as like a reference if needed. If not, that's just noise. Don't put it up there. This is about you, your company, and answering the questions that investors have. This is not a McKinsey report. I don't care about it. Okay? And the tracking expert, right? You can have reports about your main KPIs. In my opinion, and no pressure, guys, because I understand that some of you are early stage, so it's still hard to A, identify the right KPIs for you, and B, track those KPIs. Yet, I think that you guys need to start thinking about it, because a data room is about data by definition. So you need to somehow show what is the data that you're tracking and do it and track it. It can be through reports that you can export, like on a Google Sheet, every day, every week, every month, whatever you want. And you can show, for example, I don't know, the number of users, the engagement, number of downloads, number of minutes per week on the app, number of transactions, number of, I don't know, on and off ramp transactions, whatever the metrics are. But force yourself when you build a data room to add some data and track it. If you are super cool, you might want to use some live dashboards. This is Geckoboard. There are many tools. Geckoboard is just one of them. It's basically an online tool that you connect with APIs to either your own app or to Google Sheet or to whatever. And it shows in real time the most important metrics of your business, right? Again, if you're early stage, it's going to be hard to build a dashboard, and you might want to hold for a minute because you have other priorities. But I just want to show you, in an ideal world, imagine if you meet an investor, the investor say, hey, can you send me information about your company? And then you send an email, with a brief, so that when I receive the email, I know who you are and what you're talking about, because I might not remember you. And then there is a link. The link goes to the data room. In the data room, I can navigate the data room and understand everything: the story, the traction, the product, the documents, the financials, the fundraising. And then imagine if in this data room, I have a dashboard that shows me in real time how you guys are doing. That is like, to me, that's kind of like the ideal scenario. Because A, it saves me a lot of time. I don't have to ask 2,000 questions. You're giving me the information right there. And B, you're showing me that you are a data-driven company, which is exactly what I'm looking for as an investor. Yeah, okay, the story is cool, but you know what is important? The data. And you put the data on your cover page. Like, you know what I'm saying? In many cases, for you to give me the data, I had to ask 30 times. And then in many cases, what happens is that you are reacting to that. Like, I ask for data, and then you're like, oh, okay, give me a week. I'll put together something. I'm not saying that it's bad, but imagine if instead of that, you have a link. Oh, here's my data, right? What is my point, guys? My point is, when you're raising money, same as when you're communicating in general, when you're presenting your project, don't be naive. You already know what the audience wants to know, so just give it to them, right? It will show that you're a professional, that you understand how to play this game, you're efficient, and it would put you, I can tell you, like straight to the top of my list of candidates, straight to the top. Okay, so I have a few slides now about specifically the pitch deck, but I also I give you another chance to ask questions if you have questions. Is this valuable? Is this boring? Let me see if I can see your faces. Oh, your cameras are off. Okay.
That's a really cool tool, the Geckoboard. I've actually never seen that.
The Geckoboard is super old. Actually, I remember using it like 10 years ago.
Yeah,
and it
looks really good.
It hasn't really changed because it's so simple that there's nothing to change. It's literally like indicators of data. So there is a free tier, and then there is a pay one, but it's not the only one. The problem is that other tools that I found, like Tableau, for example, they're mainly made for large corporations, marketing agencies, and stuff like that, right? Where you're, maybe measuring like impressions, conversions, and all of that for big campaigns, and those tools cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. So I like Geckoboard. Again, not saying that it's the only one, but because it's feasible for a startup also to build it very quickly. You don't need you don't need
cool.
anything fancy. Okay, let's continue. Pitch deck. We've been already covering it somehow, but But now I want to give you like a couple of tips. Well, the first one, before we get into it, is do you really need a pitch deck? This goes back to my slide about the vehicle and the format, right? The fact that you're pitching doesn't necessarily imply that you need a pitch deck. For example, here I had 3 examples on screen, and you guys have this presentation and it's clickable. So you had the links. If you click on it, it will take you to the articles. But you had 3 relatively recent examples of companies that raised dozens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars without a pitch deck. Mistral.ai literally raised 105 million euros with a 7-page PDF. I read it. Honestly, it was good, but it was not mind-blowing. But what happened there is that they raised at the right time. This is a competitor of ChatGPT. So they raised at the right time. These guys are from Europe. Europe was very concerned about like the information that ChatGPT uses, IP, privacy. And so they basically said, we're going to build, a ChatGPT that is kind of the European version. So very focused on privacy and blah, blah, blah. And so, A, the timing was perfect. B, the problem was very popular at that time. It was a big pain point. And C, the resume of these guys is outstanding. That's it. There is $100+ million with a 7-page PDF. Of course, that's an exception. Of course, we might not be able to do the same, but I just want to challenge one more time, this idea of, oh, you need slides, oh, you need a pitch deck, oh, you need a 12-slide Silicon Valley pitch deck. You don't. The other one, I think, is from India, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember. But I think it's an Indian company, and they raised money with emails, basically. They didn't have a pitch deck. They just had the story, newsletter, and they had enough traction that they closed the round before launching it, right? So very interesting. Again, I'm not saying you have to do it, but I want you to challenge yourself and say, hey, there might be better ways of doing things. Now, you need to understand that if you change something, somehow it increases your risk. For example, if you go on stage without slides at a conference, yeah, it's cool. People are going to hear to what you have to say. They're going to pay attention, blah, blah. But the risk is that you screw it up and you're done. The risk is that you forgot what you were going to say and you don't have slides to help you and you're fucked. You need to understand that. You want to raise a round without a pitch deck? Yeah, it's cool. You're new, you're different, you're exotic, and blah, blah, blah. But unless, you can actually make it happen, it's risky. So be different can be a good thing, but it can be risky. But I still think that it's a good idea at least to evaluate them. That being said, let's go back. I'm going to show you now the standard way of doing of building a pitch deck. These are the typical ingredients: the problem, solution, product, market, business model, traction, team, and since this is a pitch deck, it's not a company deck, you also want to add the ask and the use of funds. Okay, these are the typical ingredients. What I mean by that is that you might have more, you might have less, right? Depending on how much time, depending on the expectation of the audience, blah, blah, blah. That's perfectly fine. You might have the demo. You might have, maybe you don't have traction, but you replace it with the plan, for example. I don't know, okay? My point is, these are the typical ones. The order might change. So you're now forced to use these ingredients in this order. For example, this is something that I consider relatively often. When you are presenting something that is kind of like hard to believe, either because it's really ambitious or because it's something that people in general don't really understand. Like it's a field that is kind of like very technical, maybe, or it's a solution that seems too good to be true, just because people don't understand how it works, right? In that case, it might be a good idea to put the team slide at the beginning instead of at the end, to create credibility. So, for example, let's say that this is a healthcare company and you're releasing a new drug, a new vaccine, right? You can be very smart, but it's hard to believe that you're going to be successful just because of how the industry works, the big name, the pharmas in the US, and blah blah blah. It's going to be very hard for people to believe that your startup can disrupt that space, unless you start saying, I had 3 PhDs in pharma, and I was the head of Congress in my country regulating pharma in Europe and blah, blah, blah. And then I quit all of that to run my own startup. All right, I'm listening. Because clearly you know what you're talking about. Clearly you know how the industry works. Clearly you have connections, right? Clearly you know how to navigate that. And so if you put that up front, you create credibility, and then I listen. If you put it at the bottom, by the time you get to the solution and you're talking about the dream of changing the industry, like I stop listening, because I know that it's so hard that the chances you're going to be successful are really low. So I'm not going to waste my time listening to you. You know what I'm saying? So this might not be the case for all of you guys. What I'm just saying here is, you have the typical ingredients, you have the typical agenda, the typical flow, you have the typical Google, like the typical template you can Google. In some cases, the recommendation is to follow that. For example, at a pitch competition, it might not be a good idea to innovate. But on the other hand, in many other cases, you might want to innovate as far as the content, the order, the agenda, and all of that, the format. Okay. So think about it. Now, what people don't usually say is, what are the things that you need to make sure that you cover with your pitch deck? Yes, of course, I want to know about the problem. That's what everybody says, right? I need to understand the problem first. I want to see that the problem is big. And it's 1000% true. Although this is not about the problem. This is about the business. The reason why you're talking about the problem is because you want to show that the business makes sense. But it's not about the problem. You use the problem to achieve your goal of showing that this is a good business opportunity. It's a good investment opportunity. So the typical mistake that I see, guys, is that people spend a lot of time talking about the problem, the solution, the market, the competitors, and this and that, which is all good, right? But this is not about educating the audience. If you're using statistics, if you're using data, I appreciate that. And if I don't see that, I might actually ask for that. But not because I want to know the statistics or the data. It's because I want to know that what you're building makes sense, hence that this is a good investment opportunity. So always remember that, guys. The goal of a pitch deck is to show that you're going to generate a return for your investors? That is the number one question that I want your pitch deck to answer. How are you going to generate a return if I put money in your business? If you don't answer that question, but you tell me all about the market trends, all about your curriculum, all about, thank you. But if you don't answer that question, you're failing. You're failing as a communicator. Okay? So do what we said before at the beginning. Put yourself in the position of the audience. When you write a pitch deck, maybe ask somebody else to pitch it to you. Pretend you're the investor and go mentally prepare to answer this question. Is this company going to generate a return? If I put $1, is this company going to give me $20 back in 5 years? If I put 10,000, are you going to give me $200,000 back? If I put $1 million, are you going to give me $20 million back? That is the question that I need your pitch deck to answer. Of course, the problem is that you cannot have a slide that says, I'm going to generate a return for you. Because that's not something that you state. That is something that you need to show. How do you show it? By making sure that the business has what it needs to have. A real and validated problem. A real solution that makes sense. Ability to build a solution. Ability to sell that solution. Ability to scale that solution. Ability to monetize that solution. Ability to stay relevant and allow communicate. Because if you communicate that collectively, the answer is yes, this company is going to return my investment. Okay? So, that's why I said these are the ingredients. But the most important thing here is the cake. It's not ingredient. And the cake is a business investment. Sorry, an investment opportunity or business opportunity. Okay? So, look at your pitch deck and ask yourself, is this pitch deck answering the question? If yes, you're good. If not, go back and redo it. The second goal of a pitch deck, show me why you and not anybody else. AKA, show me your unfair advantage. It's very hard nowadays to come up with something that is unique. And I'm saying this, a few years ago, I wanted to believe that we can still innovate and, I can still make a difference in this world. And well, that's so good. But the reality is there are a lot of people building startups. Building a startup has never been so easy, at least to get started, not to be successful. And so you now have like a crazy number of people building startups. So just from a numerical perspective, you have a lot of competition. The cool thing here is you have a chance to be better than the competition. So don't try to convince me that there is no competition. Let's just start with that. There are a lot of people that are trying to solve the same problem you're trying to solve. Some of them, or many of them, are actually doing it by building the same solution that you're trying to build. And it's perfectly fine. It's fine. It would be crazy to try to say that it's not true. It's fine. So the real question is, why you and not anybody else? And I actually want to extend this to a second circle of competitors, because you're not only competing from a business perspective, from a market perspective. So your competitors are not only the companies that are building the same solution to solve the same problem. Those are your direct competitors. Those are competitors from a business perspective. You're also competing against startups that are not doing what you're doing, yet they're pitching to the same investors. So if I invest in DeFi, for example, I might be investing in remittances, and I might be investing in microloan platforms. From an investment perspective, unless my investment thesis is strictly focused on one vertical, only remittances or only microloan platforms, unless I'm so extremely focused on one single thing, from a DeFi perspective, I'm going to invest in the best candidate that I have. And at some point within the DeFi space, I don't care if it's microloans or if it's remittances. I'm going to invest in the best startup that has the higher probability of generating a return with small risk. If that is going to happen through remittances instead of microloans, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't care. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're a remittance platform, your competitors from a business perspective are other remittances platform, but from an investment perspective, is any other company that is within the scope of investment of the investors that you're pitching to. And that makes it really hard. So this is just to say, you need to look at your pitch deck from the perspective of the investor. It's not about you. It's not about your problem. It's not about your solution. It's about, if I put $1,000 in your company, how can you give me $20,000 back in 5 years? That's it. If you convince me that you have more chances than the other competitors, than the other startups that are pitching to me, and or less risk of dying, I'll go with you. That's it. That's it. Okay? So think about it. Why you and not anybody else? And this is somehow, it's not exactly the same, but like it somehow implies, or it's connected to this concept of unfair advantage. Unfair advantage means that you have something that is radically better than anybody else. And this is really hard. It's really hard to have it. And honestly, I had to say two things about these guys. And sorry for being maybe a party pooper, or but A, make sure that your unfair advantage is clear, crystal clear. You might have a slide that says, this is my unfair advantage, or you might just communicate your unfair advantage by going through the whole pitch. Like, it's a more less explicit way of communicating your unfair advantage. My point is, make sure that you're including that in your pitch deck. What is your unfair advantage? And the reason why I was apologizing is because some of you might not have an unfair advantage. And the reality, guys, is if you don't have an unfair advantage, you're going to have a hard time raising money or in general being successful as a startup. And to me, this might be a good opportunity to say, okay, maybe I don't have an unfair advantage for this business concept. So maybe I shouldn't pursue that business concept. But where can I have an unfair advantage? AKA, maybe you should use the unfair advantage as the driver to decide what type of company you should build. Sorry for, let's take a step back. You want to be an entrepreneur. Where do you start? Hey, I saw a big business opportunity. I'm going to go for it. Or, hey, I have this passion that, I've been cultivating for many years. So I want to make a difference in this space. So I want to become an entrepreneur in this space. Those are two valid ways to become an entrepreneur, but they are diametrically opposite. I would say, when it comes to make a decision, consider what is your unfair advantage. The fact you're very passionate about something doesn't make you the best entrepreneur. for that thing. The fact that you were able to see a business opportunity or a market opportunity doesn't make you the best entrepreneur for that. What makes you the best entrepreneur for something is if you have an unfair advantage. What is an unfair advantage? As I said before, from a high level perspective, you have something that nobody else has, and it's really hard to obtain. Specifically, it can be experience, connections, titles. Like the team can be an unfair advantage. The example that I said before, I want to release a new vaccine. If you don't really know the space, if you don't have the credibility, if you don't have the reputation, if you don't have like the if you're not backed by the scientific community, by the industrial community, like it's not gonna happen. If you want to tokenize wine, you might be really good at smart contracts, but if you don't know anything about the wine industry, it's gonna be very hard for you to do it. Very hard, right? So the team definitely is one of the potential unfair advantages. But not only that, another one is the go-to-market strategy, for example, or the user acquisition strategy. For example, if you're an influencer and you have 5 million followers, well, that means that if you come up with a product, even a stupid one, even a product that sucks, it's going to be relatively easy for you to sell that product because you already have 5 million followers. So they might not buy it, but compared to somebody with the same product that doesn't have followers, you have an unfair advantage. You already have an audience, and you already have a free channel to position your product. Other people with the same product, or even with a better product, they will have to work hard, spend time and money just to put the product in front of 5 million people. You can do it with a tweet or with a post, with an Instagram post. Will they buy the product? I don't know. Will you be successful just because of that? I don't know. But you have a big unfair advantage. You have 5 million people. You have access to 5 million people for free. That's a big advantage. So you have a free channel to sell or even to validate an idea, just like to test things. That's a big, big thing. Guys, in many cases, this is not about who has the best product. It's about who positions the product, who has access to people, right? So unfair advantage number one, the team. Or unfair advantage number two, user acquisition strategy or go-to-market strategy, free access to people. Third example of unfair advantage, the product, the IP. Like I have a patent, I have a secret formula, I have something that I've been working on for 20 years. So if somebody wants to replicate the same thing, maybe it's not going to take 20 years, maybe it's going to take 10 years or 5 years, but it's still going to take a long time. Okay, that's an unfair advantage. Market growth. This is actually the one that might make more sense for many of you guys. You are focused on something, on a market that is growing so much that just by not screwing it, you're going to be successful. Just by participating, you're going to be successful. For example, a lot of this ChatGPT stuff, like these people that raised 100 million euros with a 7-page PDF, they had two unfair advantages. One was the team. As I said, the team was top notch. X Google, X I don't know, X this, X that, X NASA, X whatever. Like the team was top notch. But the other unfair advantage was that they were raising money at the right time for the right idea, for the right problem. So, I mean, it's an exception. There is 100 million euros. I'm not saying that it's normal, but clearly they were leveraging the growth of the market. They were raising money in a market that is extremely popular, that is growing extremely fast. So people are putting money in that as they are betting on horses, right? And they have a horse with a good pedigree. Boom, there is 100 million euros. The same team raising money to release a vaccine might not work, right? You know what I'm saying? So in your case, right, this is about Web3. There are a few good trends, but not everything is good in Web3. A lot of people now, I think that like the ChatGPT of Web3 right now is decentralized infrastructure and or tokenization of assets, distributed AI. Right, there are a couple of things that, in my opinion, are kind of like the unfair advantage of the industry. Excuse me. But it might not be your case. NFT marketplace. I don't know if it's an unfair advantage. I'm not saying that you shouldn't build an NFT marketplace nowadays. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, you know, that is not an unfair advantage. So if you want to build an NFT marketplace, the market is not going to help you. You need to build your unfair advantage yourself because of your know-how, your experience, your team, your go-to-market strategy, your IP, right? You need to build your unfair advantage because the market is not an unfair advantage. Okay? That's what I'm trying to say. Was this clear? Because this is like, oh, sorry about that. I didn't pass the slide. Anyway, that was going back to what I said before. You're supposed to listen to me, not to look at my slides. I'll pause for a second. Was this clear? Because the unfair advantage point to me is a little abstract, but it's extremely important. So just a quick yes or a quick no, just to know if you're still there.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Peter, you are the best. Thank you. Okay. No, thank you, man. It helps, you know, like I'm completely blind. So this is an example of something that I wouldn't recommend you to do. So the next 2 or 3 slides are about typical mistakes that I see in pitch decks. Mistake number 1. When you talk about your competition, you're basically educating me by showing me, you know, what your competitors do, but you're not talking about your competitive advantage. You're not saying why you're better than your competition. So there's nothing wrong with this slide as long as you then add another slide that says, hey, after educating you, now that you understand my space, probably because you didn't have the context, because you're not an expert. Otherwise, I would just skip it. But since you're not an expert, let me first tell you how the industry works. And now that you know about it, let me tell you what my competitive advantage is. The problem is that 98% of people forget about the competitive advantage piece and only talk about this, the competitive landscape. So the fact that, for example, let's say that you are the first column, right? AI. So this is a real pitch. Sorry, I'm using somebody else's pitch. Somebody that pitched it to me, but no hard feelings, right? The fact that this guy has a crypto product and Raft or Boosted.ai doesn't have a crypto product doesn't mean that AI SOT is better. The fact that you're using the blockchain doesn't mean that you're better than somebody solving the same problem without using the blockchain. In fact, in some cases, using the blockchain is not the right way, it's not the right approach, because it might be slower, it might be more expensive, it might be more complicated. It might be right. So the fact that you're using a technology, unless you explain the benefits of doing so, but just the fact that you're using a technology is not a plus. The fact that you have a feature is not a plus, right? So the fact that you have an equity product, well, first of all, everybody has an equity product, so that doesn't really make any difference. The fact that you have an AI investment platform and one of your competitors doesn't have it, like, it doesn't really tell me anything. It doesn't tell me anything, right? So the mistake that this company made was, A, that they're showing facts instead of showing competitive advantages, and B, that they're using metrics that don't really make any sense, right? Again, like, they even put a metric that doesn't show any difference. The employee one that I have there, okay, thank you. You're educating me, but why is your company better than Raft that has 71 employees? Why is that better? Who said that having less employees is better than having a lot of employees? Especially when the difference is 10 to 71. We're not talking about 10 to 10,000. Okay, maybe 10 to 10,000, you could have a point. Hey, look, they're overkilling it. They're not efficient, like the Twitter thing. 90% of people are useless. Okay, cool. But what are you trying to say with that? The funding. Actually, if you think about it, 71 people with $165 million is much better than 10 people with $2.5 million. So what are you trying to say? Anyway, I'm being a dick right now. What I'm saying here is, this slide really seems like your mentor told you that you needed a competitive landscape slide in your pitch deck, and you put together one and you put it in there. But this is not about vomiting information. If you have a competitive landscape slide, the whole point is, show me how you are better than your competition. And hopefully, if you have extra time, show me how you are going to maintain that advantage over time. For example, right now we have more clients than the competition. Okay, but show me how you're going to maintain that, because maybe your competition is growing faster than you, right? That's just an example, right? So, mistake number one: A, not including a competitive landscape slide. B, including it without showing why you're better and how you are defending your delta, your differentiator. Okay? Remember, you're not educating me. You're showing me an investment opportunity. Okay? So that was example number one. Example number two of a slide that is usually very weak in the pitch decks that I see, the team slide. Typical mistakes. A, you don't say anything. You just put pictures. You just want to show that you have 3 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. It doesn't mean anything to me. Or the opposite mistake is you write, too much. You talk about Michael loves cats and taking walks on the beach in the spring. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. We have something in common, but I'm not going to invest in you because of that. Now, if you want to include that because it's fun, because it's different, because you're trying to connect from at a human level, that's fine. Like, it's your style. I respect that. But that cannot be all of the information, because that doesn't make any difference from an investment perspective, right? What I want to see here is whatever information you have that shows me that the business has everything that it needs to be successful. If you're building a company that tokenizes wine, you need somebody who knows about tokenization, like smart contracts, blockchain, digital assets, tokenomics, all of that shit. And you need somebody who knows about wine, because it's hard to believe that an engineer that doesn't know how the industry works will be able to create an audience, validate the value proposition, talk to the main players in the industry to run pilots. It's hard to believe that. It's not impossible, but it's hard to believe that. Or right? So if you are a company in any sector, right, you need to show that you have what a company takes. If you're a restaurant, you don't have a chef, it's a problem. Vice versa. If your company is a restaurant and your founding members are a software engineer specialized in LinkedIn ads, I mean, I don't know, maybe that is remarkable, but that's a profile that we don't need. So show that, let's say with the pitch deck, if I look at your pitch deck, I should have a good understanding of what you're trying to do. Hence, I should have a good understanding of what is required to be successful. Oh, you need experience in this, know-how in that, connections in this, you need these 3, 4, 5 things. By the time I get to the team slide, I want to see that as a team, as a whole, you cover everything that the team, everything that the business needs to be successful. So straight to the point, headlines. For example, the CEO successfully exited the $30 million exit. Holu, which is hopefully related to what the company is trying to do. The other one, look, and this is not even a super good example, actually, what I have on screen. This is just a slide to talk about it. 5-year experience as a head of product. Okay, in this case, you're saying Amazon. Amazon is a big name. By the way, where it says logo, you're supposed to put logos that are important and related. So Amazon or a college, maybe, I don't know, but logos usually had psychologically. But the fact that you've been working at Amazon for 5 years doesn't really say that you're good, right? But Amazon is a big, at least to get into Amazon, you probably passed some sort of recruitment process. VP of marketing at Gmail for 3 years. Again, is that good? Is it bad? I don't know. But if you're the CMO, it's good that you have that experience. I'm sure that you're not stupid if you were the VP. Now, maybe you got fired because you did something terrible. I don't know. But you still have that experience, which is probably better than my cousin's experience who learned ads on YouTube. Maybe. My point is, in some cases, these are vanity metrics, vanity things. The fact that you have a logo doesn't mean that you're better than somebody that learned, on YouTube. But if you're putting that slide, that's what we want to see, unfortunately, right? So make sure that you're talking about like the right things that are relevant, things that are needed. If you don't have that, I understand. You will have to convince me with something else. If you were not a VP of marketing at Gmail for 3 years, of course you cannot lie, but then you need to be aware of it, and you need to show me something that, from an investor's perspective, makes me feel that you know what you're talking about. In this case, it's a credential. In your case, run some experiments and show me data, show me traction. Hey, I spent $1,000 on ads and I got outstanding results. Okay, this guy didn't work for Gmail for 3 years, but he clearly knows what he's doing. Okay, show me to me. That's the problem. Like, if you guys don't have the credential, you will have to show it. Okay, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It doesn't mean that you have to spend money on it, right? Anyway, team slide, very important to show that you have what the business needs. No more, no less. And then the last one, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. The fundraising slide. This is the most important thing, guys. As I said at the beginning, a company deck is not a pitch deck. If you're pitching to an investor, you need to talk about investment opportunity. You need to show that you're gonna generate a return, okay? The typical mistake is that everybody talks about how they're gonna spend the money instead of saying what they're gonna achieve by spending the money. This is the typical use of funds slide. I had 2 examples. I'm gonna spend 30% on product, 7% on growth, or 20% on product development, 20% on marketing, 30% on expansion, 30% of operations. That doesn't really mean anything to me, like anything, zero. Okay, to me, I don't even look at this. Because you know what I'm saying? Like, you're showing me data. Data should be relevant. Why 20 and not 25? Like, I have no way to evaluate if this makes sense or not. You're just like vomiting a number, and like this slide doesn't really add any value to me. If instead of 20 you put 25 or 30, it wouldn't make any difference. So why even bothering, right? So this is what I recommend. And I understand that in some cases it's not feasible or it's hard, right? But I want to show you this so that at least you have it in your roadmap. Hey, at some point when I grow up, I want to have a slide like this. And by the way, it doesn't need to be one slide. This is a concept that I'm communicating. It doesn't need to be in one slide. It can be spread out over multiple slides. It can be whatever you guys want. It can be a chart. It doesn't need to be a diagram. Like, it doesn't matter. But the concept. When is the ideal moment to raise money? Well, the ideal moment is when you already have something, even if it's just like a pilot, something, an experiment, and that something is working. That's what you want. That's where you want to be. Again, in some cases, it's not possible. That's fine. But that's where you want to be. You want to say, hey, by spending my own money and time, by investing my own money, by maybe some friends and family money that I received, whatever it is, I was able to create something, and that something is working. What does it mean it works? Well, it depends on your KPIs. It works means I'm acquiring users, or I'm retaining users, or users like it, or I have a lot of transactions. I don't know what your KPI is, but you're somehow capable of showing that whatever you're doing, it works, even if just a little bit, but it works. So that something is the blue line. So in my pitch deck, I want to be able to show what I did, which is the past. In this case, it's milestone 1 and 2. Hey, this was the problem. I did ABC, and this is where I am, present. And because of my traction, even if it's very little, if it's just a month or 2, it doesn't matter. But because of my traction, I came up with a plan of milestone 3, 4, and 5 that project my growth over in the future. And in the future can be the next 3 months or the next 3 years. That's a different conversation. Okay, it doesn't matter. Philosophically, you want to show that you did something. Oh, for example, I don't have traction because I don't have an MVP. I'm just starting with a deck. Okay. What did you do to put together the deck? Do you validate that the idea makes sense? Did you validate the problem? You must have done something to get to the point in which you are. Of course, the more advanced the business, the more traction, the more realistic these projections are going to be. But somehow the philosophy is, I did something, now I'm here, because of what I did, I'm expecting my business to go up. Ideally, it's not always the case, but ideally, you want to say, if I raise money now, thanks to the injection of capital, my company, instead of going like this, will go like that. This is an ideal scenario when you want to raise money. Guys, again, it's not always the case. Sometimes you need to raise money because otherwise you're dead. Sometimes you need to raise money because the competition is growing faster than you. And if you don't raise money, if you don't inject money, you're dead. Sometimes, I understand. I'm showing you the ideal scenario when you are in the strongest position to raise money. That's the stronger position. So try to be in that situation and try to show somebody that if you put money, then the company will grow faster and or better, because that will generate a return. That is where the return for your investor is going to come from. Okay? So you might not be in this situation yet. That's fine. But the mindset is still the same. I want to understand the past. I want to understand where you are. And I want to understand where we could be in the future. However you structure your pitch deck, you need to deliver that information. You cannot have a pitch deck without a plan. Your investors invest in the future. So they want to know the present. They want to understand how you got here. But the way they're going to make money is with the future of your company. So you need to talk about that. It can be the short-term, future, mid-term, long-term. That's a different conversation. But I want to see what you're projecting. And it can be financials. It can be users. It can be transactions. I don't know. It doesn't need to be dollars. It doesn't need to be money, especially at the beginning. But I want to see growth. And then we figure out how to monetize it. But I want to see growth. Let's say if you have an idea, if you know how to monetize it, but you're not going to be able to grow it, it doesn't matter. So I'd rather see that you are able to grow, and then we figure out how to monetize it, right? Ideally, you want both. But all right. So remember, as a result of your pitch deck, I want to see how I'm going to make money. I'm going to see why you and not anybody else. And in order to do that, I need to understand your past, your present, and what you have in mind for the future. I want to understand why you're raising money. And the answer is because by raising money, I can achieve this. How? Yeah, with marketing, with whatever you want. But this is the how. This is what I want to see. This is the use of funds. Okay? All right. And then I wrap it out quickly with this. My recipe to create a pitch deck. My recommendation, if what I said today makes sense, if you think that your pitch deck doesn't deliver what I said, how are you going to make money, blah, 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 my recommendation is grab your pitch deck, throw it away, not because it's bad, but because it's easier to start from scratch rather than fixing an already existing pitch deck. Once you have a pitch deck, you're biased. And you're going to be trying to say, oh, I like this slide. How can I save it? No, that's not how it works. So start from scratch and really think, what is the goal of my pitch? What do I want the audience to understand? And write it down. Start with bullet points. What are the main points, the main message, the goal that you want to achieve? And start working on the flow. Do it by working with bullet points. Don't write stuff. Why? Because it's easier to move blocks. Imagine that like all of these concepts are blocks. So it's easier to rearrange blocks. For example, the team slide. Should I put it at the beginning? Should I put it at the end? Okay, let's do the bullet points. And then once I'm sure about what I need to include to achieve my goal, I work on the flow. Once you had that, write a script. Having a script means literally word by word what you're going to say. Not because you had to learn it by heart, but it's because a good exercise. It's a good exercise. So, hello, my name is Lorenzo. Thank you for being here. Today, I would like to talk to you about this and show you that this is a great business opportunity. Right? Like, write it down. I do it all the time. I even include jokes. I include, expressions. I include everything so that I have a really good control of when things happen. Remember, you want to be controlling the audience attention, right? So you need to know what you're going to say. By having a script, you can check your time because you can read your script and say, oh, I only had three minutes and it takes me 4 minutes to read the script. Clearly, it's not working, or vice versa. I have an additional minute. You can check clarity because if I don't understand your script without slides, I'm not going to understand your script with slides. That's the reality. Unless it's a scientific thing and you have like data, graphs, and charts and blah, blah, blah. But in general, if I'm talking about your business, like I should be able to understand what like the 90% of your pitch deck by listening to you. The slides are just supporting what you're saying. They're not replacing you. Okay. So you can check that. You can check clarity. You can check engagement, right? By practicing with somebody. And then at that point, once you have a script that makes sense, at that point you build the slides, right? Build the slides mean, okay, slide 1, I'm going to include this concept and I'm going to include this joke. I don't know. The most important thing is each slide delivers a message. Like, don't add slides just for the sake of adding them. Like the competitive landscape slide that I show you. Oh, Lorenzo told me that I need to include the competitive landscape slide. Boom. No. Ask yourself, what is this slide adding to my pitch? How is this slide participating in answering the question, are you a good investment opportunity, yes or no? Okay. Every slide needs to be relevant. Every slide needs to contribute a little bit. And then only at the end, you work on the design. Once everything is done, it's a silly idea to spend time on the design before you had the whole big picture. Because then if you need to change things, you're wasting time, you're limited, right? So I think a lot of people start from the bottom. I think a lot of people start from, I had these slides, I want to use them, or they start writing the slides. Do it the way you like it. This is my recipe. I think it might make sense to many other people, but it doesn't need to. But this is how I do things. So, if you ask me if I had to build a pitch like tomorrow, this is exactly how I would do it. This is how I build my presentations when I go to conferences and all of that. And that's it, guys. And the last thing is practice all the time, privately, in front of the mirror. Record yourself and then watch your recording. Practice in front of your family, your cat, your friends, small audience, big audience. Practice. It's very underestimated. I do a lot of public speaking. I practice all the time, and there is no shortcuts, honestly. So that being said, that is what I had for today. 10:59. So as you guys can tell, I used a little bit more time than what I thought, but since I had a good buffer, I didn't go overtime. Plus, you guys bombarded me with your questions, so that made me lose a little bit of time. Peter, you were so annoying, interrupting all the time.
Right. Perfect timing.
Guys,
that was an interesting presentation.
yeah, in your case and JK's case, I guess you guys already heard a little bit of this during the mentorship session. Actually, you guys inspired this session a little bit. Honestly, like I added some things because they came out when talking to you guys, and I thought it was a good idea to make it available to the rest of the audience. So apologize, but I appreciate your support. Thank you for staying until the end. If you guys have a quick question before we wrap it up, I'm happy to answer it. If not, it means that A, you're sleeping, or B, this presentation was so good that I didn't leave any room for questions.
Exactly.
Actually, I do have a question about like when you talked about like you really have to write about how investors are going to make money back. But I mean, for like some companies like who are really in like later stage about like Series B or C, they really have plan of maybe going to IPO so that the investor could actually exit. But like in the case of like seed round, I mean, maybe if we are actually trying to launch our token, that is the way. And if the investor are like investing as a like SAFT or a token investment, they have really pretty much chance of like getting their investment or making their money back or really soon. But like if it's a like seed equity investment, then most likely like it is going to be really hard to get back their investment in 5 years, which is their fund period, or 5 or 7 years. But because like you either have to go to like Series B to make the old equity from the investor to get like sold to the later investors, or either like you have to go to IPO. So like, is it worth it for like seed company, like seed or pre-seed, like if you're actually trying to seek the investment, like trying to give out the investor the exit plan, like you talked about like how investors are gonna make money, or like is it just okay to skip it for the early stages?
I would say yes, always, although with a caveat, right? Which is you don't need to be very explicit, because at the beginning you don't know if you're gonna do an IPO or if you're gonna be an acquisition. You don't know when it's gonna happen, right? And honestly, talking about those things when you are still at PowerPoint stage, like idea stage, might be just a big waste of time, right? Because you're just speculating at that point, right? So maybe it's not a good idea to get into those details, although you can still answer the question, am I going to make money as an investor by showing the potential of growth? As I said before, right? If in order to generate a return, no matter how IPO or acquisition, you need to be growing. So at least show me that you're going to be growing. If you don't show me that you have the potential and the ability to grow, then automatically there is no return, right? So what I'm trying to say here is maybe in super early stages, you don't have to be explicit in terms of how the return is going to materialize, but you need to show that the potential of getting a return is real and is big, right? And so talk about your growth. And think about it. If you're super early stage, you might not even want to talk about revenue. Because, as I said, right, if you show me that you're going to grow like an animal, like crazy, like exponentially, even if you don't have the best monetization plan ever now, it's safe to think that you're going to monetize it at some point. It's like Facebook, right? Very cliche example, but Facebook, they started to monetize years after starting the company when they raised over $100 million. Like they raised the first 3, 4, 5 rounds with zero monetization, because their main KPI was not revenue. The main KPI was number of users and engagement, because they knew, hey, at some point,